So if you watched last week's video, thank you very much. This week is going to be similar. It's a sister piece of wood to what I turned last week. Except I'm going to turn it in reverse. Last week, this was the bottom. This week, this is going to be the top. Now, this piece of wood, also cut last fall, but I brought this into the house, so it's dry. It's less than 10%. There's no way I'm going to keep the bark on it. You can see it's just flaking off. I'm not even going to attempt to keep it on. So I'm actually going to make this the bowl right here. Now, because I brought it in the house, dried quicker, I do have a crack right here, but it doesn't go too far. It really just goes down to the pith, which I'm going to get rid of anyway. So it's probably only going to be about this deep. And yeah, I think this should turn out well. Hopefully I'll get the same heartwood, which is last week was in here. Now that'll be at the top of the bowl. So I'm going to go ahead and get it mounted and we'll see what this looks like. This bowl is not going to be a natural edge, so I don't have to worry about saving the bark. So in this case, I can start from either direction, from the top down or come up from the bottom up. I don't have to worry about the bark. Okay, it's mostly round now. It's been about 20 minutes. Unfortunately, I'm still getting some fairly big cracks here. I was hoping they would be gone by now. They're still there. So I'm going to make the bowl a little smaller. I may treat the cracks as well, just because I don't want to lose too much bowl. The other thing is I don't want the bowl to be this tall, given the diameter. I'm thinking I'm going to cut it off here. That does something else for me as well. It gets rid of the pith, which is right here, which if you're going to get cracking later, that's where it will be. So it'll get rid of that. So I'm thinking I'm going to follow this line right here, and that will be the top of the bowl. And then I'll see how these cracks look after that. So here I am just shaping the outside of the bowl, establishing where I think the rim is going to be, and just doing a series of push and pull cuts. You can see here once I switch to my bowl gouge, it's cutting well and I'm removing a lot of material fairly quickly. And at this point, I'm really just chasing the cracks. They're getting less. They're starting to disappear on this side. That one there is fairly deep, I'm afraid. That one may need to be treated. Again, just doing a push cut here. You can see on my sleeve a lot of materials coming off fairly quickly. And again, just chasing those cracks, working away at the outside until I see those cracks have been minimized. Stopping occasionally just to take a look at it, to do an inspection. And also, as I do this, you can see that the shape of the bowl is changing. It's becoming a different shape than what I initially planned and initially started out with. This was not in the original plan, but I'm now thinking I may make this a pedestal bowl. So leaving this here as a foot, as a pedestal, because I'm almost out of these cracks. I can go a little further here. So I can either make this the bottom right here, or I can leave this on as a pedestal. For now, I think I'll go with the pedestal and just focus on getting rid of those cracks. So now that I've decided that this is going to be a pedestal bowl, it actually is a good opportunity to go even deeper into the bowl. Here you see I dramatically changed the shape of the outside of the bowl, and that did help me reduce the amount of cracks that I was dealing with. But that's the danger of kind of not going into something with a plan or changing your plan, because I spent time shaping the outside of the bowl with the exact opposite profile that what I'm currently putting on the bowl. Had I have done this right at the very beginning, I could have made some very deep cuts very quickly and had this shape very early on. But it wasn't until I got further into it and I decided that, given what I was dealing with the wood and the cracks, that this shape seemed to suit the wood better. And I guess that's the difference. Sometimes I watch turners and they'll sit down and within an hour they'll have a bowl, whereas sometimes, I may be 2 hours. But part of the reason for that is what you're seeing here. Changing my mind and changing the shape after I get started. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that's just the consequence of doing that. But in the end, I think it was the right decision for this wood. And sometimes if you've got a plain piece of wood, you don't need to do that. But sometimes you deal with different things as you get turning and you have to adjust as you go. But in the end, I think I had a good result. Please leave a comment and let me know what you think. Now that I'm done the outside, I've flipped the bowl around and I'm starting to work on the inside of the bowl. Here you can see I've left the faceplate on and the tailstock engaged. That just gives me some extra support, especially in the beginning. I've got a lot of weight here and I do have a fairly small tenon on the base of the bowl. So until I get rid of some of that weight, I want to give it as much support as I can. The other thing is, if you do have a catch, it can put a lot of force on that tenon. So the more support you can provide, the better off you are. The inside's cutting well. I'm using my bowl gouge. I'm able to do push cuts on the inside of the bowl. And as you can see, in a very short period of time, I'm able to hollow out the inside of this bowl. The inside usually goes quicker because you're just following the profile that already exists on the outside. I've gone about as far as I can with this faceplate in the way, so I'll go ahead and remove that. But even with that faceplate removed, still a lot of weight here, so I will engage my tailstock just on the wood itself and then continue to work the inside. And at this point, as you'll see here in a moment, I can remove almost all of the wood and yet just leave a very small stub that will provide me a little bit of additional support to take some load off that tenon. Okay, the bowl is shaped. I've sanded it initially. I'm going to sand it now from 120 up to 600. But I'd like your opinion on this. So there were some cracks in it, as you know, and I filled them with coffee. They are flush now with the surface. Coffee and CA glue. So obviously they are a contrasting color. It's obvious where the cracks were. I had two choices. I could have either done this with a contrasting fill or tried to use sawdust and try and blend it in. Where they're perpendicular to the grain pattern and the grain is so obvious, I thought no matter how I filled it, you'd still see them. So best to, instead of trying to make it look close, best to contrast it. So let me know what you think in the comments, if you like this treatment or whether you would have preferred that I didn't go with such a contrasting color. Like I said, I'm going to go ahead and sand it now and then we'll come back. Okay, we are all sanded. I sanded it, burnished it, it looks good. We're going to go ahead now and apply wipe-on poly. You can do this on the lathe or off the lathe. I prefer to do it on the lathe. Make sure I get a good, rub it in good. It is, as the name suggests, wipe on. So you just apply with a cloth, wipe it on and rub it in a bit. Now, unlike most polys, you do shake this up. So I'm just going to go ahead and put some on a cloth, start applying it, and then we'll turn the lathe on and rub it in a bit. This first coat will take the most just because the wood will soak it up, but subsequent coats not nearly as much. Now this bowl, as I mentioned, was wet, so even though I've been working on it in the shop for a few days and it had been thinned out, it probably still will dry a little bit, but the wipe-on poly does a good job at sealing it, so it'll actually slow it down, and that's what you want. You want, whenever you're drying wood, you want it to be slow so that it won't crack anymore. I have to say anymore because, as you know, it already has cracked. But let's slow it down so it doesn't crack any worse. You don't spread. It feels good. I mean, obviously, if there was any rough spots when I'm putting it on, I'd feel those, but I do not. So that's good. So we'll do both the inside and the outside. And then once I get this first coat on, I'm going to rub it in with the lathe spinning. And all the subsequent coats will be with the lathe on. In between coats, I will sand just with, I've got the white sanding pad, which is about 1,000 grit. So I'll just sand in between as well. Okay, so, yeah. So I'm just going to put a little more on with the lathe spinning. And we'll rub that right in. Not going to take a lot. That's the first coat. Looks good. It's already got some gloss to it. We'll let that sit for an hour or so, and then we'll come back and put another coat on. And we'll probably put 4 or 5 coats on this before it's done. So here's the finished product, and you can clearly see the cracks that were in the wood that I filled with coffee. Please leave a comment. Let me know what you think about these, whether you would have preferred that I use coffee or whether I tried to use sawdust to get them to blend in as opposed to contrast. I like the shape of the pedestal bowl that you see here. Yeah, I think not only was it a good use of the wood, but it also is a pleasing shape. As I mentioned in the video, this wood was a sister wood to last week's video. You can see that here. They were turned opposite ways, one top down, one bottom up. Again, leave a comment to let me know which one you prefer.